What's up, weirdo? Shade Tree Surgeon here, and today we're going to talk about modern classic motorcycles and why they suck, but also why they're so important. Yay. Firstly, let's go over exactly what a modern classic motorcycle is. It's pretty much a catch-all term nowadays, but I believe it was originally coined by those nostalgia peddlers over at Triumph. In fact, a lot of folks would say that Triumph invented the modern classic market. They would be wrong, but you know, I've never let being wrong stop me, so I can't talk that much crap. I'm of course referring to that amazing chunk of hipster bait, the beautiful new Bonneville air-cooled 800 released in 2001. It had a heritage engine configuration, in this case a parallel twin, which is synonymous with English motorcycles, and the engine itself was designed with form over function in mind, hiding more modern components among very nostalgic looking parts. The new Bonneville had double overhead camshafts, but the way that the cam cover was molded made it look almost exactly like the old rocker arm cover did on the original Bonneville. It even had a dummy pushrod tube, which is also the very first thing to rust on the new Bonneville. Ask me how I know. Triumph made a modern motorcycle dressed up to look like a classic. And the new Bonneville, to me at least, stands out as one of the most faithful modern interpretations of a classic motorcycle ever made. And in my opinion, they achieved this because it's not a modern motorcycle at all. Certainly, it was a new design. It was a design from the ground up, but it was not modern in the slightest. It had non-ABS hydraulic front and rear disc brakes, which, while certainly better than the OG drums of the Bonnevilles of the 1950s, wasn't anything new. Triumph had been putting hydraulic front and rear disc brakes on Bonneville since the 70s. It had double overhead cams, you might argue, though, much more modern. Well, double overhead camshaft is by no means a new design. It dates all the way back to the early part of the century when we kind of first invented the internal combustion engine to begin with. Kawasaki had definitely popularized its effectiveness in a motorcycle platform in the 1970s with the KZ900. Now, man, the damn thing wasn't even fuel injected. Fuel injection didn't become standard on Bonnevilles till like 2007 or 2008. The few concessions the Bonneville did have to the modern world were mainly based around emissions regulations rather than any kind of advanced technology for the rider's sake. So yes, it was miles better than the original Bonneville of the 1950s, but what do we really have here? An 800cc parallel twin, air-cooled, carbureted, chain-driven with non-adjustable suspension. That's not exactly what I would call a modern motorcycle. And the only reason that it's a modern classic is because it was nothing but a classic motorcycle design with classic motorcycle technology, but released in a modern era. Modern classic. It really fits now, doesn't it? And Triumph took a little nap in the 1980s, but if it hadn't, the new Bonneville that was released in 01 just as easily could have been released in the early 1980s as a successor for the 70s Bonneville, and it would not have made any waves at all technology-wise in the motorcycle market. And yes, Triumph did make an attempt in the early 1980s to update their motorcycle. They actually made an 8-valve overhead camshaft electric start engine and a rubber-mounted frame that technically is kind of more advanced than the 2001 iteration, but they didn't make a whole lot of them, so we're not going to count that. And sure, 2001, that was a while ago at this point. In fact, 2001 is the same amount of time away from now that 2001 was the amount of time away from the late 1970s when the last Bonnevilles rolled off the line. That is some pretty upsetting math, and I hate to make you think about this, but if you're in your 30s and 40s now, the 90s and the 2000s were the equivalent of your 60s and 70s.
They're the same picture.
But remember this, there was plenty of technology in 2001. In fact, that's when Harley Davidson, the reigning archlord of nostalgia, that's when Harley released the V-Rod. And the V-Rod in 2001, that was damn advanced alien technology compared to the 2001 Bonneville. Speaking of Harley Davidson, if anybody invented the modern classic market without actually calling it a modern classic, it was definitely Harley Davidson. The Sportster, of course, comes to mind, but that motorcycle never really changed after they revamped it in the 80s, and it's kind of hard to call something a modern classic classic when almost all the parts are interchangeable in a 30-year model run. It kind of grew into being a modern classic. It wasn't designed as one. More on that later. A much more accurate first modern classic would be the Harley-Davidson Evo Softail from 1984. The entire design of this motorcycle was done with the intention of making it look decades older than it was, imitating a hardtail frame of the 1940s and the 1950s with the stylistic influence of the chopper scene from the 60s and 70s. The biggest difference between the 1984 Evo Softail and the 2001 Triumph Bonneville was in 1984, the Evo Softail was actually pretty modern for its time. And of course, the much beloved Dyna was always meant to be a throwback to the Harley-Davidson FX series of the early 70s. Little known fact, but Harley designers and engineers actually started working on the Dyna platform only a couple years after the FXR platform came out in the early 1980s because the FXR was decried as looking too modern and too Japanese. And with people talking crap and not buying the FXR because they said it looked too modern and too Japanese, and the runaway success of the Softail, who could blame them for starting to design a more traditional looking replacement for the FXR right away? Now the Dyna truly embodies what it is to be a modern classic more than any other motorcycle, even more so than the Softail. Harley-Davidson spent damn near a decade creating a frame that vibrated more, handled worse, but looked older and was cheaper to produce than its predecessor. On paper, the Dyna was inferior to the FXR in every single way. Except for that whole cost thing. It wasn't as stiff, it weighed more, it had inherent geometry flaws, but boy did it make a damn good looking motorcycle, and boy was it cheaper to produce. Even as a dyed-in-the-wool FXR fanboy, I will tell you this, objectively, I do think that the Dyna is a better looking motorcycle. So why is Dyna truly the first modern classic motorcycle? Why does it answer that question I asked when you first got here, and y'all probably forgot because it's been a while since I asked the question, what is a modern classic? You have to forgive my rambling speed, I do go on at times. The Dyna was a motorcycle that was specifically designed to be a cheaper and inferior product, whose flaws and shortcomings were spackled over with a shiny veneer of nostalgia and heritage. Yesterday's technology at tomorrow's prices. That's a saying that's often hurled at Harley-Davidson, and they certainly deserve it, but so does everybody else. To me, the moniker of modern classic indicates nothing more than beautiful, nostalgic window dressing on a motorcycle that by design is cheap, generic, and derivative. After all, why is the 1991 Harley-Davidson Dyna a modern classic, but the 1991 Honda Nighthawk 750 isn't? For that matter, why is a 2001 Triumph Bonneville a modern classic, but the 2001 Honda Nighthawk isn't, or the 2002 Nighthawk, or the 03, or the 04, 2001, the year of the Harley-Davidson V-Rod and the modern classic Triumph Bonneville 800, besides the aforementioned Honda Nighthawk 750, also gave us the air-cooled, carbureted Suzuki Bandit, the Kawasaki ZRX 1200 and W650, and while Yamaha's street lineup was pretty dang modern in 2001, besides the completely unchanged Yamaha VMAX, they did offer us the legendary T-Dub 200. And his name is John Cena! Even though its availability outside of Japan was spotty, kind of available in America like every other year, you could still buy brand new in a Yamaha dealership a kick-only, no electric start, kick-only SR400. And you could buy one of those all the way up to 2021. The Honda Shadow, the KLR 650, the DRZ 400, the Suzuki Savage, and many more. The list of bikes that the Big Four from Japan left completely unchanged since the 1980s is long and distinguished. Bold new graphics and increasingly restrictive catalytic converters are the only upgrades these motorcycles get. Harley might be the reigning champ of leaning on nostalgia to sell a product, but Japan is the true king of cobbling together leftover parts from decades-old models and then calling it new. Though the true power, the secret dark lord of modern classic motorcycles is none other than Royal Enfield.
And I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
Royal Enfield got away with selling what was essentially the same motorcycle, pretty much with the exact same tooling and dies, unchanged since 1955. They didn't even begin announcing that they were gonna phase it out until 2020. Here's some other fun facts from 1955, the same year that this Royal Enfield was brand new. UHF television was invented. Rosa Parks sparked the first major US civil rights movement, the bus boycott in Alabama. The Disneyland theme park opened up in Anaheim, California.
Horror has a face.
The first edition of the Guinness Book of World Records was published. James Dean died in a car accident, and Rebel Without a Cause was released.
You're tearing me apart!
Blackboard Jungle hit movie theaters, marking the very first time a rock and roll song was ever used in a movie, and Elvis Presley made his first TV appearance on a show called Louisiana Hayride. Now here's some stuff that happened in the 65 years that motorcycle remained essentially unchanged. Just a few little things like color television, sending a human being to space for the first time, landing on the moon, nuclear power plants, the Vietnam War, the International Space Station, the internet, the oil crisis, disco, live streaming, the 24-hour news cycle, the rise and fall of radio, Space Invaders, Super Mario, Sonic, Mortal Kombat, and Minecraft, the cassette tape, the VHS tape, compact discs and MP3s, MTV, VH1, Napster, LimeWire, Pandora, Spotify, LiveJournal, MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, YouTube. In short, everything. The oldest person I've ever met who regularly watches my channel is in their 70s. So when I'm talking to you out there, you who's on the other side of this screen, unless somebody pipes up who's in their 80s, literally everything in your living memory, everything, every single thing you've experienced, every failure, every achievement, every death mourned, every child born, all these historical events that shook the world, that impacted our lives personally, life-changing technology and soul-shaking disasters, the Royal Enfield Bullet weathered it all, essentially unchanged. That stalwart little thumper, plodding through the pages of history without a care in the world. And yes, I'm very aware that the Royal Enfield Bullet 500 got a pretty substantial upgrade in 2009. 2008 was technically the last year of exactly the same engine design, but the one that came after that from 2009 to 2020 was close enough for rock and roll, man. And just to furthermore back up my 60 plus years claim, if we count the Royal Enfield Bullet 350, that started in like 1933, so we're looking at more like 77 years. So yeah, I'm kinda right, and I'm also kinda wrong. Either way, this motorcycle has been in production for a very long time. I'm of two minds here when I think about this, and both those minds love it. On one side, it warms my rotten little capitalist heart to see 70 years of profit with an absolute pittance spent on research and development and upgrades. The other side of me loves it for an entirely different reason. You see, there's a reason that modern classic motorcycles can exist, but modern classic cars cannot. Though auto manufacturers would be frothing at the mouth to sell us a nostalgia-designed vehicle with the 70s era levels of engine tech, electronics, brakes, and safety requirements. You see, cars are heavily regulated by the government. Besides needing to produce sometimes as much as 10 times more horsepower than a motorcycle, cars are doing that while under more and more stringent emissions regulations. You also have to consider government-mandated safety regulations, airbags, crumple zones, rollover standards, pedestrian-friendly bumpers, and impact zones. Sure, they style the new cars kind of like some of the older ones, but they don't really look like them, do they? Because they literally can't. Government-mandated tech and safety standards just don't allow for it. That's why when you look at the new Dodge Challenger, oh Lord, he come! It looks like a bloated whale when you compare it to the one from the 70s. And the new Mustang looks like somebody described it to an 8-year-old with no thumbs and had to model it out of a block of clay. I hate to admit this because I love making fun of them, but the closest a modern car comes to having having truly classic sensibilities in its style is the Jeep, and it really is only in the looks department. Tech race becomes a problem too. We become convinced we can't live without backup cameras, 10-way power seats, navigation, cruise control, like heated seats, air-conditioned seats. The list goes on, and I know there are people out there who would buy a bare bones 4x4 or would buy a V8 rear-wheel drive car where the only thing that was special about it was the engine, but the automobile manufacturers literally, they can't sell you one of those. They can't sell you one legally, at least, not with this like just gigantic laundry list of government mandated nanny tech. You know what a street legal motorcycle has to have, regulated by the government, what it has to have in order to be sold in America? A rear fender that extends past the rear wheel, which is what gives you all those really goofy looking pieces of plastic on motorcycles that everyone immediately gets rid of. Turn signals, a headlight, a tail light, a horn, mirrors, brakes that are capable of stopping the motorcycle in 20 feet at 30 miles an hour, a red reflector on the rear of the motorcycle, and an orange reflector on the front, a muffler that keeps it under the decibel level of the most stringent states, which is usually around 80 decibels, though most states don't have a noise ordinance on motorcycles anyway. In fact, every single one of these statutes vary state from state. A lot of them don't have any of them. Motorcycle manufacturers just make their bikes to adhere to the most strict policies. For instance, in Florida, at least, you do not legally have to have mirrors, you don't legally have to have a horn, or fenders, or even turn signals on a motorcycle. Motorcycles are unhampered by safety regulations. They don't come with the scolding finger of technology telling us what we can and can't do. There are almost no rules. When you really think about it, the very idea of a motorcycle in the year 2023 is almost absurd. In a world of 36 airbag, pedestrian-aware, self-driving cars that will override human input and will turn into a brick if you try to work on it yourself, in this sterile, forced safety color in the lines or face re-education Orwellian little bubble we live in, you are allowed to hop on a two-wheeled Jules Verne-esque contraption that is powered by explosions, with a tank of highly flammable liquid strapped between your legs, capable of accelerating as fast as a fighter jet. And here in Florida, at least, you can do that in a string bikini with no helmet, no shirt, no shoes, no problem, baby. Knock yourself out, man. You got every single right to the highway in that string bikini as all the Teslas and Priuses out there. Is it dangerous? Sure as hell is. Do I recommend it? I sure as hell don't. But by God, I'll tell you this. The word freedom gets bandied about quite a bit where motorcycles are concerned, but if being able to hop on a two-wheeled death rocket in nothing but a Speedo and hit the highway doesn't embody the core concepts of freedom, I don't know what does. Do the major manufacturers use the non-regulation of motorcycles to their advantage in order to market us tech that was already old in the 80s? They sure as hell do. Would I want it any other way? I sure as hell don't. Give me the bare bones simplicity of a Bullet 500, a Sportster, a Honda XR650 any day. Is it neat that bikes like the BMW GS, the Honda Goldwing, and the Harley Davidson Pan America exist? Sure it is. They're neat as hell, and I really enjoy them. But they are not but the harbingers of doom for the pure, unadulterated joy that is the experience of nothing but two wheels and a motor. In a world of whiz-bang gizmos and complex gadgets, we're pretty lucky that we're still able to buy a good old-fashioned contraption. Enjoy it while you can, and pour one out for 65 years of the Royal Enfield Bullet. The world may never see its like again, and in my opinion, be poorer for its absence. Till next time, y'all, keep it weird. Hey, hold up, real quick. I'm just gonna interrupt this video for 1 second because, tell you right now, sometimes we have to have a sponsor, and today's video, it does have a sponsor, and that sponsor is me! Brapstar is the sponsor of today's video. Brapstar is coming out with a winter drop. We got all sorts of new hoodies, we got new flannel line Carhartt style jackets. In fact, I'll roll the ad I made for it and hopefully it doesn't get this video demonetized. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Daddy's home for Christmas and it's time for Brapstar Super Mega Ultra Low. We've got hoodies so good you'll make your future ex-girlfriend sign a prenup. Have you ever wanted a weighted blanket but can't deal with the crushing disappointment of your father? Well, our extra big 420-gram 3-way fleece is perfect for you. Nice and cozy. Your dad still thinks you're a loser, but at least you look like a badass. Do you want to wear a Carhartt but don't want to look like a dock worker or a New York hipster? Well, have we got the jacket for you. Our new duck cloth flannel lined work jacket can keep you warm, and all you'll look like is a man with multiple felonies. So jump on your library's Wi-Fi and head over to brapstar.com. New designs dropping in time for Christmas and old favorites coming back from the grave. You don't just have to feel like a loser on the inside anymore. Now you can show the whole world how terrible you are.
I hate you, Dad.
Brapstar.com, the one-stop shop for miscreants, losers, stumblebums, pirates, cryptids, wizards, and weirdos. Head on over to brapstar.com and pick one up. We're only going to be running them for about a week so we can get them printed and get them all out for Christmas. I appreciate you guys' amazing support. A lot of these things we'll probably never make them again. So if you want one, jump on it. We'll have it out to you in time for Christmas. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I appreciate everything you do to support us, support the channel by liking, subscribing, visiting brapstar.com. Y'all are amazing. And for real this time, till next time, keep it weird.
Crashing through the sky comes a fearful cry. Shade tree, army. Shade tree, army. Armies of the night, evil taking flight. Shade tree, army. Shade tree, army. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Panic spreading far and wide. Can the world oppose the deadliest of foes? Shade tree, army. Shade tree, army. Who will risk it all to end the evil call of Shade Tree? Army. Shade Tree, army. They never give up, they never say die, walking tall with banners high. Shade Tree Army, a ruthless gang of scum, villains, freaks, and bikers determined to rule the world.